Harihi Om Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. ओम शिष्य आत्मसमर्पण कार्पण्य दोषो उपहत स्वभावः पृच्छामि त्वां धर्म सम्मूढ़ चेताः यश्रेयस्यान्निश्चितं ब्रूहि तन्मे शिष्यस्तेऽहं शाधि मां त्वां प्रपन्नम् ओम. So we are in the 28th shloka of Bhagavad Gita's second chapter. The shloka goes like this. Avyaktadhini bhutani vyaktamadhyani bharata avyaktanidhananyeva tatra ka paridevana. So the shloka means avyakta adhini bhutani. In the beginning of all the creations, the state was in an unmanifested way. Vyakta madhyani bharata. In the middle, it manifested. It came into a state of manifestation. Bharata, O Arjuna, the descendant of the Bharata Vamsha. Avyakta nidhanani eva. Avyakta means unmanifested. Nidhanani, when dies. Eva, indeed. Tatraka paridevana. Therefore, what is the point in lamenting? What is the point in being sorrowful? That is what Bhagavan has stated in this shloka. On the surface of it, it looks pretty simple, straightforward. Before my birth in this form, I was in an unmanifested state. Then I manifested as a being and started accumulating the body, going through the 6 types of changes. Then when I died, once again, all that I accumulated was discharged in terms of the body, and I became unmanifested. A very straightforward, simple statement. But we have a lot to question and lot to learn from this shloka. So let us go into a bit of analysis. We say that this is one of the most philosophically subtle verses in the entire second chapter. It is that much of prominence that is given to this particular shloka. The concept that we are going to talk about is regarding the birth and death. Janma is birth, Maranam is death. Janma Marana Tattvam. So, for birth, there has to be a cause. Existence is a continuity and not an abstract. That is the main concept that we are going to discuss in today's class. Now, let us take the example of a tree. The cause of the tree is the seed. The tree has so many properties like shape, color, size, fruits that it bears, etc. So many of them. A seed, on the other hand, has no such properties. It may have an appearance, but everything that has the appearance of the seed does not become a tree. There is something in that particular tree which causes the manifestation of the tree. But the cause which is in an unmanifested form is in the seed. That manifests, the tree manifests out of it. So a manifestation is an emergence of several properties that we witness in the tree, and they are borrowed in nature. When the tree dies, the manifested property slowly disintegrate back into its original form. When here the Bhagavan says, the potential which was in the unmanifested form before inside the seed also goes back into the unmanifested form. Our experience, not all seeds manifest into a tree. There is nothing which can differentiate between the seed and the seed that bears the tree. Logically, we can deduce that there must be something in the seed that bears the tree. And we also know that once manifested, it goes through the process of change. Now, let us take the example of waves and water. In the seed, we may not be able to see that it has become manifested. But if you take the example of a wave and water, it becomes pretty easy for us to even see it in our own eyes, that there was only water and it manifested into a wave. And after the wave dies, it becomes water again. We can literally see it in the waves. So this cycle is what is Janma and Marana. A very easy and a straightforward one. But let us take another example. Now, in this example, I'm just going to take the soap and the bubble. The question that one may ask is, how can you say that upon death, life form goes into an unmanifested state? Let us say X exists. Using the power of the X, some capability is created, which is Jivan. And this capability is created out of Prakriti. The Jivan comes into existence, and upon death, the Jivan ceases to exist. Now, for you to understand the challenge in the question, let us take the example of a soap bubble that we blow. I am the creator. I take a soap bubble, or I take a soap water and blow it into a bubble. The bubble is, enjoying itself. It is just traveling from one place to other in accordance with the flow of the air, and it dies. The bubble dies. Right. So if I say that bubble is the Jivan, how can you say that it goes back to its original form? The soap water goes back to its original form, but the bubble has gone back to its original form is not applicable. So something came together and it died. So there is only one clear creation and destruction. The creator is the God who has the continuity of existence, not the created, which is I. So this is the challenge that we are going to analyze in our class today. The problem in this example, literally, from a logical sense, is the Shad Vikaraha. This doesn't exist in a bubble. It comes and it goes. Right? It doesn't, grow, or it doesn't, there are the 6 elements that we talk about. Asti, Jayate, then Asti and Jayate we can see. Then Vardate, right? Viparinamate, right? Vardate is grow, Viparinamate is transforms, right? Then Apakshiyate, where it reduces in size and capabilities, and vinashyati, which is death. The vinashyati we can see. The Shad Vikara as a concept does not come into existence in this example of the soap and bubble. That is one place where it fails. The concept of a karta and bhokta is also a thing that fails with respect to such an example. Beyond the body, there is a doer and a person or a principle that experiences. In any life form, you can see that. Even in a tree, it kind of, when there is winter, the things, it shrinks kind of a stuff. And when it is spring, it just brings back into life. There is a lot of change, etc., that happens in any life form. And that experience of changes is not applicable to this soap and bubble concept. And hence we cannot attribute this as an example when it comes down to the life form. That is what we are trying to say, right? Your example is good, but this example fails the amsam of the jivan. And yet we will try to address from your example also. But let us logically first defeat that particular example for this situation. Right? The concept of something beyond the prakritik amsam. Prakritik amsam is the, what do you say, material, physical form. This body, this, skin and all those stuff. Those are the prakritik aspects, the material form of it. But we know that beyond the matter, there is something that we experience, that we can identify. Right? And that can be controlled and regulated. This is also something that we experience. Right? Now, that experience which is beyond the control of Prakriti, like, identification, feeling, planning, all those things that we do, everything has got to have a capability behind it. And that is the jivan that we are talking about, and is not really directly applicable when it comes down to the example of a soap and bubble. So that is the first thing that we want to establish, saying that, hey, we understand your example, but this example does not fit into the concept that we are currently discussing. Right. Now, having understood this, what we realize is that it leads us to two eternal factors: existence at a substratum level. Right. In that substratum level, we can see a continuation of existence, while the expression of the existence continues to change. The book exists, the paper exists, the ash exists, etc. The existence as a substratum continues. This amsam is called as sad. The misconception that we form is we identify me as existing. Existence becomes a property of mine. Then we change that kind of understanding, and we see that the continuity is actually in the existence. Only the form comes and goes. We can say that we have borrowed that existence. That is the sad amsam. The second one that we see, that we experience, is chaitanya amsam, a concept of intelligence or consciousness and awareness. There are two ways of looking at it, like being inquisitive, the ability to experience, ability to infect, etc. Right? So this is one thing. The other thing that we also talk about is the experience of experiencing. For example, I think of the color red. At that time, I also know that I think I thought of the color red. Right. That thought continues, and at that same time, the thought was there also is known to us. So there is some consciousness that continues. That principle is called as Chaitanyam. So beyond the Prakritik Amsam, there are two things which we know it. We can see it, we can feel it in ourselves. There is no praman, there is no means of knowledge that is required. To say that I exist, I don't need anything. That I exist is a self-illuminating factor. Right? So it is self-expressive that I exist. And that aspect is what is called as the soul or the Ātman. That Ātman has these two properties, Chaitanyam and Sad. Now, beyond that, we also talk about the Anantam, which is endless. It's a continuum aspect, which is also something that you know, that you understood after we discussed. Right. So after you come to a bit of an awareness, you can see that continuum. So Anantam is another thing. That is why we say Satchidanandam. That which has these three properties: Anantam, the endless, eternality, and Sad, which is existence, and Chaitanyam, which is the conscious principle. Now, these two properties, or the Anantam as a property, if we attribute it, are not applicable to the Prakritic concepts, to the body. Matter continues to change, hence it cannot be the existence at the substratum level. Matter is always reactive in nature, not proactive, hence it cannot be the intelligence or conscious principle. That is another logical argument that we place to establish that the continuum or the other concept of Atma exists. Right? So that is what the first level of discussion that we have today on this topic. Going further, we can look at it a little more in a deeper way. This Atman, this Paramatma Swarupam, there are two other things that we speak about. One is Ekatvam, that this existence and conscious principle cannot be many. There can be only one existence. Right? So when I say Atma, and it is very, what is very colloquially used, that the Atma, uska Atma chala gaya, like his Atma is gone. Right? So we try to divide that Atma into the body. Right? Instead of seeing the existence as the continuum and the expression as borrowed existence, we started looking at the existence as the truth of the body. That is the misconception that we have. When you throw that misconception away, you will realize that there can be only one existence, and that is the Ekatvam. The same thing applies to the conscious principle as well. The awareness of something that has happened, including your thought, including your speech, or whatever that you identify that yourself with, that can be only one. It cannot be different. You have a different consciousness, I have a different consciousness. No, that is not true. Just as I realize, you also know and you also realize it. You also get the same reflection, and that can come from the same body if the expression is exactly the same. That also establishes that ekatvam of the Sad and Chit. The another one that we talk about is Ananda Swarupam. That is why there are some people who say Satchidanantam, Anantam is the thing that they add to it, eternality, or Sachidanandam, Anandam, Ananda Swarupam, the bliss, the, what do you say, happiness quotient, that aspect of it. That is the Swarupa which is attributed to it. The pursuit of happiness is again seen as something that is always applicable. The Prakritik Amsam is not pursuing that particular happiness. It experiences happiness and sorrow and so on and so forth. But the proactive approach to anything we have seen is always towards the Anandam, or towards that bliss. Even a person, if in case they are committing a suicide or something, they do that because they think that there is something beyond which will bring happiness or something of that sort, which will liberate them, whatever they think in terms of. It is seeking that satisfaction, seeking that happiness is the reason why they do that. A sadist or person who inflicts pain on himself, he inflicts the pain because he derives a pleasure out of it. Your concept of pleasure, pain may be different, but the person is doing it not because he wants pain, but because he sees a sense of pleasure in that pain. And hence, something which always pursues that Ananda Swarupam must be of the nature of Anandam, must be of the nature of that particular bliss. Right? Now, this aspect of it is defined to be something like that of a sugar. Sweetness is not the property, right? Sweetness is the nature of sugar. That is what we need to keep in mind. That Anandam that we are talking about is that substratum level, which is in the base of everything. In that base, that Anandam is a Swarupam. Right? So, in addition to the two properties that we spoke, the Sad and Chit, the other two properties are concepts that can be used to understand or to realize that particular soul is Ekatvam, that it is only one. Not you have an Atma and I have an Atma, but Atma Swarupam is Ekatvam. The second one is Ananda Swarupam, which is of the nature of bliss. That is the other attribution that we do to the Ātman, to the Satchidananda Swarupam, to the Paramatma. Now, we study this and we establish this as Ekatva Siddhi in the traditional approach of learning. Right? We will address this after the concept being discussed in this shloka. Right? I'm adding it here because if we can establish the Ekatvam, then we can also deduce that the destruction of that Ekatvam is not possible. Right? So because of that, we will also address the Ekatvam. But let us look at the Avyaktadhini Bhutani, Vyaktamadhyani Bharata, Avyakta Nidhananyeva, Tatraka Paridevana. Now, life versus consciousness. This is the first thing that we take into consideration. This concept is subtler and not empirically evident. So, taking the same soap, the water bubble, etc., let us try to look at how it is established in our tradition. We also use Vedanta, we use the Tarkam, all, logical analysis and so on and so forth. Right? So let us try to go a little deep to establish and understand this concept. Basically, we will try to provide evidences to this concept. Now that we have established that there is a concept which we identify as Ātman or Jivatma. Right? So first is from the Vedantic perspective. Now, Vedantic perspective is applicable only to those who believe in Veda. If I take Veda as the Praman, then I can say it has been said in Veda, so this is truth. If a person says, I don't even know Veda, or I don't take Veda as a Praman, then we will have to talk from the other point of views. We speak of 6 Praman. 4 of them can be grouped into one as a secondary source of knowledge, and one is the Pratyaksham. Pratyaksham is your first knowledge source, the primary knowledge source. That this pen is black in color. How did I know? Because I have seen it. Right? And because I have seen it from the eyes, I don't need any other source of evidence to say this is black in color. Right? Now, this is called as Pratyaksha Anubhavam. Similarly, if there is any sound that you hear, that this one is hot, right? Like that, anything that you experience through these 5 sensory organs are called as Pratyaksham. The secondary source of knowledge requires a primary source of knowledge. That is why it is called as a secondary source of knowledge. They are grouped under a term called as anumanam or inference. But we know that we use, for the purpose of it, when we go into deep study, we define the secondary source into anumanam, upamanam, arthapatti, anupalabdhi. Right? So this is the way that we define the experience of learning through a secondary source of knowledge. And the last one is Shabdam. Shabdam is the Shruti. Or if a person says, I believe in, Quran, then that Quran becomes the Praman for that person. Because it is said in Quran, I'm not even going to question it. I'm going to accept it as is. Right? That is the way that we look at it in terms of Shabda Pramana. If it is said in Bible, right, it is gospel. It is defined as simple as that. If it is not said in Bible, then it is a myth. It is a belief, right? The problem is in the Sanatana Dharma, they say that there is word, but the word has a limitation to the extent it can communicate. And this is true. I have written a small sentence, and that doesn't mean it has provided me the meaning. That meaning is something that we derive out of it. So, if a statement is written in a scripture, we do not take it as a gospel, no matter where it is written. Even in Veda, even for Vedantic studies, what we say is if a statement, if a sentence has been written, we need to study that sentence and understand what it actually means. And that is the truth. That understanding of what the intent, scope, and the depth of what has been conveyed is the true meaning and not the statement that is mentioned in a scripture. The anumanam or inferences are based on pratyaksham and shabdam. That is the main thing that we all know. Once I have known, then all these examples can be worked out. I know there is rain, and I know that it kind of, the water comes from the cloud and it is spread all across the city or whatever it is. Now that I know the concept of rain and I just walk out, I see that the road is all wet. I say, yes, it must have rained yesterday. I did not have a primary source of knowledge of seeing the rain. But when I walk out, I see the wet road and stuff like that. I say, oh, it has rained. And that's correct. And that was through the secondary source of knowledge. In this example, the Arthapatti. Right? So this is the basis of our understanding. Vedanta defines the Ātman and guides us to gaining the knowledge about Ātman. Hence, this is an evidence only for those who accept Veda as a Shastra or as a Praman. Now, let us look at the inference. This is based on the cause and effect. Every change we know in nature is transformation. The word that we use is parinama, right? It is not absolute annihilation, right? Uchedam is not the right thing that we can ever experience, be it in the form of matter or be it in the form of energy. We know that it can never be destroyed. It gets only transformed from one into the other. Right? Matter changes form, and energy changes expression. Nothing becomes nothing. This is known. Now that we established that there is something beyond the material aspect, which is energy and the matter kind of a physical nature or scientifically defined objects, there is something beyond it, which we discussed earlier. Now that we have established, the same must be applicable there as well. It can come into existence and go, but there has to be a continuum. It cannot be that it becomes nothing, because the rule is nothing becomes nothing. So from this experience, we can infer that there has to be some continuity of Jivan. Before birth, the living principle was in an unmanifested form, in a causal form. During life, it manifests through body and mind. And after death, the body decomposes and this unmanifested form continues. The Ātman, or the principal concept that animated the manifestation, must also revert to its own causal state, because the experience of ours is logically, it cannot become nothing. Absolute nothingness is neither observed nor can it be ever inferred, can it be ever, conceptualized in mind. And hence, the continuity is established in the logical argument under the Anumana Pramanam. Right? Under all the other pramans put together, we can logically deduce that something has to continue. Hence, causal reasoning itself supports avyakta nidhanam, the third or the second line, first part. Then there is something called a shunyavadam, nothingness as a concept. We in the Vedanta, we negate it because a nothingness cannot be experienced. Right? If there is nothing, if there is some specific concept called as nothing, even not thought through, right? It is not even an object of thought. If it is absolutely nothing, then it cannot be experienced. But we do experience the I. Right? The concept of mind, yours, etc. Everywhere we see that the concept of I is experienced. Hence, we can negate the Shunyavadam, saying that, hey, the Shunyam, that there is nothing, cannot be attributed as a value. A beautiful line of thinking again. There is another school of thought which says Kshaniga Vijnanam. Basically, We agree that is nothingness is not there. The experience of continually changing things is what is giving us an experience of existence. The example is a river. You don't see the same thing again, but we see the same river again. It is because continuous changes have happened. A screen with the moving pictures, right? That is the same thing as Kshaniga Vijnanam. So we did cover about it when we spoke of, Swarup of Nityam, right? Pravaga Nityam and Kutastha Nityam. If we want to recall when we were talking about the Kutastha Nityam in earlier classes. It was in several classes, right, where we were talking about the properties of Atma. But here, again, the Pravaga Nityam is what the Kshaniga Vijnanavadi comes about to identify this continuum of existence. This is also negated because while Kshaniga Vijnanam can provide a basis for that which is experienced, right? Be very clear, right? So, Kshaniga Vijnanam, what they say is about the river, for example. That is true. In the river, I see a continuous change, no problem. But the person who is seeing it, right, that person is not defined within the Kshaniga Vijnanam. That person has to exist. For a person to witness a change, the person must have existed without a change, is the basic, logical argument that we present. And this also we discussed as to how not, why not. I was not wearing a coat, now I'm wearing a coat or a jacket or something like that. I have changed, right? But I have not. Right. The problem is you have removed the persona and you're looking at the body. Right. The persona is the one who is observing. That observer cannot change and witness a change. That persona has to be a constant. And from that point of view, the Kshaniga Vijnanam fails to address that witness. Okay, so this is again another reason why the existence continuing, the Chaitanyam continuing or remaining Kutastham is established basically. So we are trying to logically, we are trying to scripturally, we are trying to philosophically analyze and establish that avyakta adhini bhutani vyakta madhyani bharata avyakta nidhananyeva. This concept called as soul, the Ātman, the Paramatma, is in a avyakta form, comes into vyakta form and goes back into avyakta form, is being proven through logical and scientific approach on top of the Vedantic approach. We have seen several aspects in Veda where it has been established as well. Now, another one. Analysis and inference based on continuity of function. The rule is again that which we have experienced it ourselves. That which produces coherent cognition, memory, and individuality must have a continuing substratum. Right? We have a clear scientific and established principle that establish this rule. Right? Unless that substratum is there, unless a base is there, right, this change of production cannot happen. Is, those who have been studying science, they would know this as another rule. If there were total annihilation of the conscious principle at death, there could be no continuity of individuality, memory, karma, etc. This is a complex one, and hence there is an absolute possibility of argument that could challenge this. Again, we are getting into the metaphysics and a deeper scientific or a philosophical platform. And hence, this is not as clearly proven as the other aspects. But as it stands today, there are established theories that state that analysis and inference based on continuity of function, right? That continuity of function can only be happening if there is a substratum, if there is a base, right? So based on that, what is beyond the material science of world, we have theory, and based on that theory also, it is established that the Atma continues. Examples from Upanishad. The one that Upanishad gives is deep sleep to waking. We experience the continuity of I. Though the awareness that we have is unmanifest during the deep sleep, upon waking up, the continuity can be experienced. The Upanishad, the way that it goes is, there'll be a person who is sleeping he will be in Sushupti, and the Guru will go and call his name, and he won't even respond. So, and then when he wakes up, he responds. That is the basic example they try to show, that the I continues to exist, though it became unmanifested in the deep sleep. So this suggests that the consciousness can go through the unmanifested form and reappear without ceasing to exist. This would be possible only if there was a substratum, only if there was something in the base that continues at all times. Death in that particular Upanishad is seen analogous to that of deep sleep. A full unmanifestation of the life principle, not its destruction. Now, this is a tarka, inference drawn by comparing known facts. So, based on our own experience, we know that something has to exist for it to continue, and this is not applicable to the bubble unless you see the bubble or the world of bubble as the soap water, which was the creation. In that case, also you will see that it becomes the water again, somehow, somewhere, some things. Right? It will eventually get into that particular form. So that is the basic argument that we put for this shloka. Now, we will go into another rule. The destruction of an instrument does not entail the destruction of the agent. If a musician's flute breaks, the music stops, but the musician remains. Right? The production of the music done by the musician is going into an unmanifested form till the instrument that is used to create the music is produced again. That is the basic argument. That is the basic means that we provide. When the body, which is the instrument, ceases, the agent, the jivam, is not logically required to perish because they are not of the identical kind. Body is inert and consciousness is in an aware state, chaitanyam, right? So because they are two different things, when a body ceases to exist, we cannot conclude that the agent is also ceasing to exist. That is what it is. It is not saying that it is not or it is. That is not what the proof is. But to show you that it can separately exist, we try to give this example. There is another rule which is called as rule of negation. You cannot derive non-existence of consciousness from the destruction of its medium. Is the way that the rule is also spoken in modern philosophy. In the Vedantic study, we put it as Karana Bheda Yukti. This principle is used in Vedanta to establish this continuity. The Chaitanyam cannot be destroyed with its adjunct, with the attachment, with the Shariram. Shariram is made of 5 elements. That is scientifically proven fact. Life form acquires it as we can see it in the seed, right? The tree relationship. Shariram is thus an attachment to the life form or Jivan. Thus, the destruction of the Shariram cannot lead to the destruction of the causal element. So as I told you, this class will be a very, very, very deep philosophical, but a class which scientifically establishes all the principles of Atma that we are talking about. And that is what we are in the process of doing. Again, life cannot emerge from non-life. This is also a scientific aspect. Say, for example, this pen is made of plastic. Right? Now, it cannot come out of something else. A plastic pen cannot come out of gold. If in case it comes out of gold, then it will be a gold pen. Right? So, similarly, a life form cannot emerge from a non-life. Right? No, the non-life can be added to it. I can put some gold things here, so I can add a diamond stud here and all those stuff. But the plastic pen remains the plastic pen. Right? That is the concept. We can add things to it, no problem. That is what we do from the Prakritikam. But the core, right, cannot exist from something which is not part of the core. Right? So that is what we try to establish as a rule here. Consciousness is of a different order or dimension. And there is no property that one can attach to the conscious principle. Right? Makes the order of dimension between the two to be very different. Hence, the destruction of one cannot lead to the destruction of the other. Let us say that we have never experienced it. Let us assume that there are four dimension based objects. If there is, that 4-dimension based object cannot destroy the 3-dimension objects, and 3-dimension cannot destroy the 4th-dimension objects. They are dimensionally different. Right? Maybe you can apply some mechanisms to destroy the 3 dimensions using some, things that you derive and apply it at the 3rd dimension. But the object of 4th dimension will be very distinctly separate from the object of the 3rd dimension. Just to put it into perspective. Again, another scientific rule, we are just trying to use it to say, from an argument point of view, you can even consider this to establish that death of one cannot be leading to the death of the other. They are 2 different things. And if they are 2 different things, there has to be a continuum. And that continuum is what we are talking about in this shloka. So, to conclude, the element that composed the form returns to their causal condition. The pranan and the sukshma shariram goes into the Hiranyagarbha or Sutra Atma. The conscious self, being distinct from both, either continues with the vasanas and karma, seeking new embodiment, or upon realization of its true nature, continues the existence in its true Paramatma Swarupam. That is what we in Advaita establish. From a Vedic references point of view, we have Brihadaranyaka Upanishad with Shankara Bhashyam, especially in the in a specific section called as Madhukanda, right? This is a discussion between a husband and a wife, where it is not a husband and a wife, where it has become a guru and a sishyai, right? The wife becomes a sishyai to learn, right? So that place, it comes, it's a very beautiful, honey, madhu, we know that. That is the essence that you get out of that particular section of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. There it is established consciousness continues even when mind and body functions cease. Therefore, at death, when those instruments fall away permanently, consciousness likewise continues in its causal unmanifest state, and it's never annihilated. Hence, the self is nityaha, avyayaha, and asangaha is the way that the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad speaks. Right, so those are all the Vedic references that we can give. As I said, we will, as an extension, go into Ekatva Siddhi. But this is something that we can take it up for our next week's class. Considering the depth of this and also an impending question from Jyoti ji, I would like to just take some extra minutes to address them.
But this is today's class was very similar to one other class that I took on Aitriya Upanishad, where it was kind of coming back and saying that the Atma is the Atma remains, like you are the Atma and you remain.
Correct, yeah.
The Shloka 1 of Aitriya.
At the end of the day, all the Upanishads will conclude on that only. Right? There are 108 Upanishads, if in case you count in accordance with some of the traditions, right? Everything will have the Jiva Ishvara Aikyam as the main concept. So, yep. Very, very beautiful Upanishad that is actually Aitreya Upanishad.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no questions.
Thank you. Okay. So the question that I wanted to address today was also the question from Prabhakar. But Jyotiji has put it in a place where it revealed the question even more to me. The way that she asked us, Hi Guruji, if we have to accept a non-doer philosophy, and we are also bounded to this family, this samsara, what shall I do to keep our subtle ego out that unrealizingly grows on us? Example, I know I'm not a doer, but somewhere I feel that, oh, I have two kids dependent on me financially, so I have to keep up with this job. Or if our body is taking from this earth to grow, then what can we do to give it back? Right. So this was a great question that she asked, and this also relates to the question that Prabhakar had asked, seeking how is it that we have to discharge our duties or discharge our functions. Now, we need to really understand this from an Advaitic point of view. Nowhere it is said, even in Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan himself will quote Janak Maharaj, the king Janak, who even after attaining, continued to rule as the king. Or Bhagavan, he himself says, there is nothing that I need to get or need to do, but I continue to function. Now I'm serving you as a charioteer. Right? This is because if in case I do not function, the world will follow my path and become idle. So I have to continue doing my thing. In all these concepts, the basic thing that we miss is a person becomes a non-doer, not by not doing, but by removing the association of the doership in that which is being done. Now, the moment you experience that fear, that, hey, if I don't have the job, what will happen? I have to support my children, right? My daughter is going to the college now, and I have to pay the fees, and so on and so forth. You are already taking the doership in you. So, you have not accepted yourself as a non-doer. You are still seeing yourself as the doer. Becoming a non-doer means I remove the association of a doership from the prakritik amsam because I have realized myself to be the paramartika sat, the chaitanya amsam. I am the soul, not this body. All other dependencies are related to this body. When I realize this, one thing that will also appeal to me is this body is the kshetram. In fact, in the 13th chapter, Bhagavan will very clearly declare this. Idam shariram kaunteya kshetramit avidiyate. Right? This body, hey kaunteya, is called as the kshetram. And then he goes to further explain the concept of kshetram and kshetrajna, as well as jnanam and jneyam, etc. Prakriti and Purushan. Now, in this way of explaining, what Bhagavan has also tried to tell is this kshetram is this body and anything that is associated to this body, because it is part of the prakritik amsam, and it will naturally work towards it. It can never perform an adharma. The dharma adharma, right, can only be performed by a doer when a chaitanya amsam gets associated with the body. When the chaitanya amsam is not associated with the body, it can only do dharma. You having the doership in you is because of the samsara, because you have not been able to realize the difference between the two, which is the soul and the prakriti. And if you have realized it and you have associated yourself with the soul, then the prakritik amsam cannot be in the adharmic or dharmic aspect at all. It will be committed to the kshetra paripalana very naturally. Right? A kshetra paripalana is not a destruction that I see as a destruction. Even a volcanic eruption is a kshetra paripalana. It has to erupt in order to save something bigger, maybe, or in order to bring in some kind of new nourishment to the world. Right? Whatever it happens, it has a role to play, and we do not define a destruction or goodness or a badness and so on. Once you are becoming an Ātma Swarupam, when you understand that I am the Ātma Swarupam, not the Prakritik Amsa Swarupam, then I becoming the doer, I becoming the protector of this will stop. Whereas you will become the base, allowing that prakriti kamsam, which includes your own body. Again, remember, when you have realized yourself as the Ātman, there can be no difference that will come into you between Naresh and Jyoti, or between Sham and Haribhaiya, or between Prabhakar and Ravi. There is no difference. It is all one at the Atma Swarupam. Right? Your differences will cease to exist. And in that state, there will be no dharmam or adharmam that is associated. But the body of Jyotiji will continue to provide the necessary stuff which is right for that situation, bringing the dharma into the prakriti. That needs to be understood. That I am bringing is bringing the doership in you. You cannot say, I understand I'm a non-doer. Your buddhi has understood a concept of non-doer and you are thinking, I am non-doer. That is not the realization of a non-doer. A non-doer is a realization that I am the Atma Amsam and the Atma Amsam is this. And this provides the base for the Prakritik Amsam. And the Prakritik Amsam is going to be taking care of only dharma of the Prakriti. That I am the doer is the only thing which creates adharma as well as the punya karyam. From that point of view of dharma, only it creates. The doership is the one that creates it. When the doership is removed, this continues to function, and this can only function in dharma. As was told earlier, when you practice dharma, that is very good because you are in the doership mode and you are practicing dharma. As soon as you become into the non-doer mode, where you become associated with the Atman, this dharma is the only thing that can continue. Adharma can only come when I am associating myself to the Prakriti. Very difficult and a subtle answer, but I hope your questions were replied as best as it could in the given circumstances. And we have another 16, 17 more chapters to go. So Bhagavan will tell all of them, and I will try my best to put the explanations possible and try to enable you get into that place. Make sense?
Yeah, thank you, Guruji. Thank you.
Thank you. Prabhakar, I know the last time when you asked the question, I don't think I answered it fully to my own satisfaction. But when this question was raised, I thought it was really the one that was...
Precisely, Guruji, because I was, thinking about this Kshetra Paripalana and Dharma Paripalana. Kshetra Paripalana, I took it as a role I have taken. You just touched upon the body. Body also means the role I have taken in this world. So Dharma Paripalana is automatic, is what you say. If I detach myself from the doership, and if I attach, then I think I can do all nonsense. So
absolutely. Yep. And remember, the word is dharma rakshana and kshetra paripalana. Right? You protect the dharma by practicing dharma. You nurture the kshetra by providing the support to the kshetra. The samsara happens when we become dharma paripalakas and kshetra rakshanas. Oh, this is my house. I have to take care of this. This is something that has to be in my control. This is kshetra rakshana. And dharma paripalana is like me telling, oh no, that one is wrong. We should not be doing that. Here we are not practicing the dharma. We are trying to preach the dharma. Right? So dharma paripalana and kshetra rakshana are the reason for samsara, and when you switch it around, that becomes the reason for dharma itself. That becomes the Sanatana Dharma itself. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I will take leave today and we will connect again in our next week's class. Harihi Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat.